Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. And thank you, Madam Presiding Officer, for this opportunity to make this broad sectoral statement in the House today. I want this early on to take the opportunity once again, and this time in joining with the rest of the House, to extend sincerest condolences to the family of Dr. Jeff Davidson, who served as chairman of the Tobago House of Assembly and then as the first presiding officer of the THA in 1996. It must be noted in this House that we are eternally thankful for the roles played by Dr. Davidson in Tobago's long-standing fight for greater autonomy. May his legacy inspire today's generation to fight on and fight harder for what is rightfully Tobago's. This statement, Madam Presiding Officer, comes on the cusp of the annual THA budget, which will be presented in this House on Monday, 26 June 2023 at 10 a.m. The debate on the budget will happen subsequently on Thursday, 29 June 2023, starting at 10 a.m. Essentially, Madam Presiding Officer, this House will sit 3 times this month of June, which will perhaps be the most times the House will sit in a given month since the coming into force of Act 40 of 1996. Today, I'm grateful for my colleagues who have agreed to waive the usual time for a statement to be read in this House, to allow for me to put on the record of the House clear explanations and capital FACTS facts surrounding the matters that the Prime Minister of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago have been deliberately misleading the nation on. I wish to present this statement as a forerunner to the budget presentation next week, so that no time is wasted during that important presentation on dealing with the calculated disinformation campaign being run by those opposite, with the leadership of their puppet masters in Trinidad. And so today, I will uncloak the disinformation campaign against the THA and the people of Tobago, led by the Prime Minister, give a measured update on the now infamous audit reports commissioned by the Tobago House of Assembly, and finally, I will share concerns about the Tobago Autonomy Project that started before the birth of every member present in this House. Madam Presiding Officer, for over past month, I have been making attempts on a continuous basis to have the post of Chief Administrator filled. And today, we are still without a Chief Administrator. Section 71(4) of the Tobago House of Assembly Act is very clear, which stipulates that prior to consultation with the Public Service Commission on the appointment of the Chief Administrator, the Prime Minister shall consult with the Chief Secretary. Madam Presiding Officer, to understand why we are at this place of uncertainty with a Chief Administrator and how deadly deceitful the leader of the government of this country is, we must go back to what transpired for the filling of vacancy last year when Mrs. Bernadette Solomon Koroma retired from that position. Madam Presiding Officer, before I do that, I recall as a child in Sabbath school, I was taught that the most deceitful character in the universe is a man called Satan. And then I get to almost the age of 38, and I encountered the Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley. Last year, on March 10th, 2022, I had cause to pen a letter to the Prime Minister to indicate my displeasure with the fact that a chief administrator was appointed without following precisely the dictates of the law. I wish to read verbatim the letter onto the Hansard record. And in the statement I sent to you, it's labeled as Appendix 1. March 10, 2022, the Honorable Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley, Prime Minister, Office of the Prime Minister, the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, Whitehall, 29 Marval Road, Sinclair, Port of Spain, Trinidad. Their Prime Minister. According to the Tobago House of Assembly Act 40 of 1996, Section 71(4), prior to consultation with the Public Service Commission on the appointment of the Chief Administrator, the Prime Minister shall consult with the Chief Secretary. Notwithstanding the clear directives in the law, the former Chief Administrator, Ms. Bernadette Solomon Koroma, informed me that one Miss Ethelyn John had been appointed to act as Chief Administrator prior to any consultation with your good self. She further informed me that this led to Mr. Richard Toppin moving from within the THA to the position of Acting Permanent Secretary within the Office of the Prime Minister, Central Administrative Services, Tobago CAST, and that a new administrator, Mr. Lincoln Nelson, was selected to serve within the THA. Further, I was informed that a formal handover of portfolios happened. All of the above happened by the 28th of February 2022, well in advance of any prior consultation as required by law. Legally and properly, this consultation should have occurred in advance of any appointment on the 28th of February 2022 and the lateral movement within the public service that ensued. It is therefore difficult to view the consultation post the appointment of someone to act as Chief Administrator as anything other than an insult to the office of the Chief Secretary and counterproductive to both of our efforts towards greater autonomy for Tobago. This may very well not be what your office intended, but this is the result of not following the law as prescribed. Nevertheless, I am inclined to a gracious intervention by accepting Ms. John to serve, and I capitalized only on the basis that she worked previously within the THA system as an administrator and thus understands it, and she is qualified for the role being bestowed upon her. However, allow me to place on record that in the future, I will decline, publicly object, and seek legal redress should this pattern of appointment of a Chief Administrator repeat itself. Ms. Ethelyn John has been accepted to act as Chief Administrator, and I will only now formally introduce her to the Tobago public and the public servants within the THA as their lead. Be advised accordingly. Yours sincerely, Farley Augustine. So, Madam Presiding Officer, note for the record how I reluctantly accepted the appointment of Ms. Ethelyn John. My first instinct was to go to court and to ask the court to deem the appointment illegal. However, many of the elders in the space advised me that so early in my tenure in office that I should opt for a peaceful outcome instead. Fast-tracked to a little over a year later, a vacancy occurred in this office on May 18th, 2023, when Mrs. Ethelyn John, Chief Administrator, demitted office upon reaching the compulsory retirement age. The Chief Administrator, prior to demitting office, did two things. One, she wrote the Permanent Secretary to the Prime Minister or the Head of the Public Service by letter dated April 17th, 2023, informing him that vacancy was imminent as she was due to retire on May 17th, 2023. In that letter, she also drew the attention of the permanent secretary to the requirement of Section 71(4) of the Tobago House of Assembly Act, which stipulates that prior to consultation with the Public Service Commission on the appointment of the Chief Administrator, the Prime Minister shall consult with the Chief Secretary. She asks the Director of the Public, secondly, she asks the Director of Public Administration requesting the order of merit list for position of Chief Administrator. Acquisition of this list would have given the Chief Secretary an opportunity to peruse the list prior to the statutory consultation with the Prime Minister. The list was never provided. I acquired a copy of the letter sent by the Chief Administrator, and I wish to also enter this letter on the records of the House. I will now read this letter verbatim, as you will see in the statement provided to you, Appendix 2. April 17th, 2023, Mr. Maurice Sweet, Permanent Secretary to the Prime Minister, Office of the Prime Minister, Whitehall, 13 to 15 Sinclair Avenue, Sinclair, Trinidad. Dear Mr. Sweet, reference is made to the caption supra. Kindly be informed that Ms. Ethelyn John, Acting Chief Administrator, Tobago House of Assembly, is due to proceed on compulsory retirement from the public service with effect from 17th May 2023. The Tobago House of Assembly Act 40 of 1996, Part 7, Clause 71, 4 states, prior to consultation with the Public Service Commission on the appointment of the Chief Administrator, the Prime Minister shall consult with the Chief Secretary. Submitted for your attention and necessary action. Yours respectfully, Ethelyn John, Chief Administrator, Tobago House of Assembly. Madam Presiding Officer, 2 days prior to the date of the Chief Administrator's departure, in light of no information reaching me about the appointment, and being mindful of the legislative requirement of Section 71(4) of the Tobago House of Assembly Act 1996, which imposes a directional mandate on the Prime Minister to consult with the Chief Secretary prior to the fulfillment of Section 121 of the Constitution, a meeting was sought with the Prime Minister by letter dated May 15, 2023. I wish to read a significant part of this letter. Part of the letter I will keep redacted until an appointment is made by the Public Service Commission. In the statement provided to you, it's labeled as Appendix 3. And this is to the Prime Minister dated May 15th, 2023. Dear Prime Minister, congratulations on your recent achievement of Honorary Doctor of Letters from Howard University. According to the Tobago House of Assembly Act 40 of 1996, Section 71(4), prior to consultation with the Public Service Commission on the appointment of the Chief Administrator, the Prime Minister shall consult with the Chief Secretary. At this juncture, 2 days away from the retirement of the current Chief Administrator, no such consultation has happened between your good self and me. This letter therefore serves as both a reminder of the legal requirement and an avenue through which I will share my recommendation for the appointment of a new Chief Administrator. Legally and properly, this consultation should happen in advance of any appointment on the 18th of May 2022 or thereafter. Last year, the procedure was improperly handled, and a letter to that effect was sent to your office reminding of the requirement in law and the need to not have history repeat itself. In this regard, I wish to have, name redacted, considered for appointment as Chief Administrator within the Tobago House of Assembly. Attached is the resume. I shall be available for consultation conversation on the matter at any time mutually convenient. Yours sincerely, Farley Augustine. Madam Presiding Officer, the letter very clearly stated the date on which the vacancy would occur. It should be noted that this letter was a sequel to the previous appointment of a Chief Administrator 2022, where the appointment was foisted upon the Chief Secretary without any prior notice or consultation whatsoever. It should be noted that the Prime Minister at the time of the appointment last year was actually out of the country. I also want members of this House to carefully note that in the absence of consultation, I made a recommendation to the Prime Minister in writing. Remember that this was the 15th of May 2023. This will become materially important. Madam Presiding Officer, no list of names was presented nor discussed pursuant to said list. There was no indication that anyone was being considered or that there was a recommendation from the Public Service Commission or the Prime Minister's office, or worst of all, that an appointment was made on the 17th of May 2023. Please remember that this meeting with the Prime Minister was held on the 22nd of May 2023. Consequently, Madam Presiding Officer, there was no need for the Chief Secretary to comment on any prospective appointment. The only name discussed in that meeting was that of the recommendation of the Chief Secretary. No other names were brought up. No bad report was given about any public servant in Tobago. I just re-proposed the name that I had written about a week before. During that meeting, no indication was given to the Prime Minister, or given by the Prime Minister, nor the Public Service Commission, that they were considering names. In fact, it came as a shock to me when the Prime Minister returned to the country from Bahamas, I believe, and led the country to believe, through his insinuations and partly vacuous statement, that we might have discussed the name of a senior public servant from caste, and that I did not inform him that there were disciplinary issues with said senior public servant. Madam Presiding Officer, let me be very clear. At no point and up to this point, the Prime Minister and myself have discussed any other public servant save and except for the one I recommended. In the circumstances surrounding that meeting, I indicated to the Prime Minister a recommendation that I based on the performance of that person as an administrator in the Tobago House of Assembly, and felt comfortable with that person as my chief advisor, because that is what the chief administrator represents to the chief secretary. The atmosphere of the meeting conveyed the impression that the Prime Minister was also of the view that it was the chief secretary's remit to choose his chief advisor. Subsequent to our meeting on May 22nd, 2023, I reached out to the Prime Minister 1 week later on the 29th of May 2023. And at 7:40 p.m. that evening, he responded by saying, quote, "Good evening. Could you send me the name of the person you suggested and who we agreed upon? I was busy in Parliament today. I will direct the PS on Wednesday." End quote. The day after this exchange was a public holiday. Madam Prime Minister, Madam Presiding Officer, maybe I'm being prophetic. Madam Presiding Officer, I again reached out to the Prime Minister 1 week later on the 5th of June 2023. The Prime Minister responded early in the morning on June 6, 2023 at 12:29 a.m. Quote, I have been begging to have the Public Service Commission make the appointment that we agreed on. Only today, in brackets Monday, I checked on it. Hopefully very soon. Close quotation. So, Madam Presiding Officer, from my interaction with the Prime Minister, there was an agreement on a recommendation, as is borne out by subsequent communication between the Prime Minister and myself, which I shared with you all today. At this point, I wasn't blaming the Prime Minister for the non-appointment of a Chief Administrator. I was blaming the Public Service Commission. I was led to believe that the Prime Minister did what he was supposed to do, and we were all waiting on the Public Service Commission. It is for that reason that on the 9th of June 2023, that the THA, through its attorney, served a pre-action protocol letter on the Director of Personnel Administration at the PSC. The Director of Personnel Administration responded on June 15th, and on the second page of that response, the 6th paragraph to be precise, the DPS said the following, and I quote, the Commission had previously appointed an officer to act as Chief Administrator from May 17, 2023, subject to consultation as provided for in the Constitution. Thereafter, the Commission was notified by the then Chief Administrator, Tobago House of Assembly, by letter dated May 17, 2023, of a report of allegations of misconduct against the officer designated for appointment. Upon considering the notification, the Commission on May 24, 2023 decided that the designated officer ceased to report for duty. Close quotation. Now, this is alarming for many reasons. Number one, no officer should be appointed to act as Chief Administrator without prior consultation with the Chief Secretary in accordance with the law. Number two, the Public Service Commission became aware of the allegations, according to them, 5 days before the Prime Minister met with me to have consultation. Number three, the question is, was the Prime Minister made aware of these allegations prior to him meeting with me 5 days later? If no, why not? It was the Public Service Commission's duty to inform the Prime Minister of such, not mine. So this talk about me not giving the Prime Minister a report is hogwash. Further, let me inform the public that the first officer that was given a copy of the final audit report that triggered the suspension of the senior officer was the former Chief Administrator, Ms. Ethelyn John. She was given the report months earlier. It is up to the sole discretion of the Chief Administrator, after reading the voluminous report, to sanction or cause to be sanctioned any public officer that was implicated in that report. That is not my duty and business, Madam Presiding Officer. The Chief Administrator laid the allegations based on the report to the Public Service Commission, and the Public Service Commission found enough merit to suspend the said officer. I am nowhere in that line of authority. But given the noises in the space, Madam Presiding Officer, I must question whether or not the Prime Minister and his friends wanted to have that senior public officer installed as Chief Administrator without consulting me. Further, I must question whether the desire to have this officer in question become Chief Administrator is to have someone who will thwart the results or the resolutions of the audit and ensure that no one pays for the crimes committed against the THA. I believe this is a firm plot to save the friends of the Prime Minister. At this point, the protracted vacancy in the office of Chief Administrator negatively affects the timeliness of treating with human resource matters in the THA. By legal notice number 105, the Public Service Commission Delegation of Powers Amendment Order 2006, the Public Service Commission delegated authority to the Chief Administrator and the THA to exercise certain powers with regards to public officers up to range 68 on behalf of the Public Service Commission. These include to appoint persons on recruitment from outside the civil service in a temporary capacity to an office in the Tobago House of Assembly, to appoint a public officer to act in a public office in the civil service, Tobago House of Assembly for periods up to 6 months, whether such acting appointment is in a vacant office or not, and in respect of such powers, the Chief Administrator shall apply the principles of selection prescribed in Regulations 18, 24, and 26, and the provisions of Regulation 25 of the regulation. Also, the Chief Administrator is delegated powers to transfer a public officer from an office in a grade in the Tobago House of Assembly to which such an officer is assigned to a similar office in that grade within the Tobago House of Assembly with no alteration in his remuneration, which power shall be exercised by the Chief Administrator subject to the provisions of Regulation 29. And in the absence of a Chief Administrator, Madam Presiding Officer, no one can fulfill this function. The morale of public officers whose human resource matters are not being dealt with timelessly would undoubtedly be negatively affected. Without a Chief Administrator, THA deeds cannot be executed. The leadership and coordination for the fulfillment of the legislative requirements of the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act is delayed. Public officers like game wardens and the security at Inland Revenue and the cash services at Finance, who are firearms users, employee certificate holders, cannot operate with firearms, forcing the THA to spend extra monies on private precepted security guards. And before I move on from the matter of Chief Ad, let me educate the public in telling them that Chief Administrator is not necessarily the most senior public servant. It is not an automatic appointment. If it were, there will be no requirement to consult the Chief Secretary. And in the Tobago space, every Chief Secretary except Hochoy Charles, who had to accept the transfer of the Clerk of the House into the position of Chief Administrator, was consulted in a purposive manner, and their recommendations for Chief Administrator accepted. However, when it comes to this Chief Secretary, there seemed to be an intent to do otherwise. Let me warn, however, let no man despise my youth. And this brings me to the audit report that is clearly the cause of all this disinformation. It is why they have slandered my name concerning the selection of a chief administrator, so that they can install who they want as chief administrator. I brought to this House preliminary findings of the audit report, and I indicated then that there were some steps to be taken before the report is finalized. In my statement to the House then, I did not call the names of any of the contractors involved in the audit. In fact, those contractors called themselves out. Since then, we have had the final report. We have sought and received sound legal advice on how to proceed. One contracted officer has been fired owing to the findings of the report. One public officer has been suspended owing to the findings of the report. The offenses highlighted in the report were forwarded to the offices, and I need you to listen carefully, to the offices of the Commissioner of Police, the Fraud Squad, the Financial Investigation Unit or FIU, the now highly anticipated Anti-Corruption Bureau, and the Director of Public Prosecution. So far, only the Fraud Squad has responded. Learning from the historical lessons of the Scott drug report, I was probably a little baby at that time, 80s, still in nappy, right up to land date, I will not be making the report public, nor will I be laying it in the House, and I will not be giving a copy to the minority nor the Prime Minister. This report will be needed to advance civil and criminal court matters, and I will not want those culpable to get away on a technicality. As Lande did. Madam Presiding Officer, it will appear that those opposite will like the opportunity to capital WAR1 their friends and to have the report thrown out of court on a technicality. As the line secretary responsible for the report, I have not even given members of the executive copies. A literal handful of public servants who shall remain nameless at this point have been privy to the report, and it's under lock and key. I will ensure, despite efforts to intimidate, drive fear, telling untruths, to defame my character, to extort, that those responsible for stealing from the THA purse be held accountable. And Madam Presiding Officer, they will be held accountable in the same manner, in the same way that those responsible for the Piaco Airport fiasco are being held accountable now. Madam Presiding Officer, the actions listed above with the audit report has intensified the efforts from Trinidad to interfere in the governance of Tobago. Perhaps, now with the passing of Dr. Davidson, every Tobagonian should read his book on Tobago, on PNM versus Tobago. It has always been PNM versus Tobago. It has always been that way. Now that they were pushed out of the corridors of power in Tobago, they have been doing everything possible and impossible to disrespect Tobagonians, to disrespect the THA and its elected officials, and to disrespect the laws governing the Tobago House of Assembly. They, in the most hypocritical fashion, have been trying to delay and destroy every development gain on the island. And that's why today, in the memory of Dr. Jeff Davidson, we must make a Dr. Davidson pledge to fight on. And so tomorrow, we will respectfully, at least this side, show up and give Dr. Davidson a hero's burial. But the day after that, know that we are ready for the fight. Tobago's autonomy must be protected on all counts, and Tobago and Tobagonians will stand up and make those opposite and our friends, families, and at last the enemies across the waters respect the institution that is the Tobago House of Assembly. Allow me to reiterate in closing, this THA will see the audit report and the actions to be taken to its fullest extent. We will carefully dot our I's and cross our T's. Yes. We will take every action possible against those who are culpable. Chiefad or no Chiefad, it will happen. Yes. And so, Madam Presiding Officer, we greatly anticipate the budget presentation that will happen on Monday and the debates to follow on Thursday, when Tobagonians will get a glimpse, in fact more than a glimpse, but a detailed report on the progress of Tobago and how progressive their administration has been over the past year and a half. Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer.